All right, everyone. Welcome to today's session. I'm just going to do a bit of introduction, and then I'll pass over to Rachel. So just in terms of tech, please use the Q&A section to ask any question you want to ask. It's easier that way because we can then collate the questions and obviously send that out rather than just using the chat box where things could get mixed up. Also, if you need to ask any question or raise anything, please feel free to use the Q&A section, or you can preferably raise your hands. But we're going to be mindful of that only because we do have we'll have over 200 registration for this event, so I'm not too sure how that's going to work. But then again, depending on how many people we have in the room, Rachel would advise best on how to go about with that. Um, just a bit of introduction. My name is Christopher. I'm one of the lead trainers at HISA, and I've got a couple of trainers here with me. I've got Kate Payne, who's also a lead trainer, and I've got Sue and Vishal, who are also trainers. And then I do have representatives from the OFS. I have Annalise and Alison Brunt. They're representative from the OFS, so they'll be, helping with questions, and also like any sort of suggestions or, answers to any questions. I also have Anna, Favi from Midair, and then we're expecting Gordon, from SFC, and Christopher as well from SFC. I'm not too sure if they're here, only because my screen's only showing me this. And then I have Matt from Liaison, and then sorry, not from Liaison, from the collections team rather. And yeah, I've also got Ruth Underwood, that's a senior product owner, and I've got Rachel Wicks, which is our head of collections development, and she is going to be going through this with you, alongside with Ruth and the rest of the statutory customers. Um, if you do have any tech issues, please feel free to email the training team at hisa.ac.uk. I've got colleagues who are on standby to help with any sort of registration issues or login issues. And I'll also be supporting with those queries as well. All right. And it is at this point that I pass on to my colleague Rachel to carry on from here.
Thank you, Christopher. And welcome, everyone. Good afternoon. I hope you're all keeping warm. My house heating is not working, so I am frozen. So if you see my gloves, that is why. Apologies, probably looks a bit weird in the camera. So just a reminder of what we're kind of trying to do with these sessions today and why we're all here. So we're going to run these once a month. So it's the first Tuesday at 2 o'clock for each month for the next few months. We've missed out March because there's a lot of student events already happening from us in March, so we figured there was enough engagement then for you as well. So once a month up until May. The idea of these sessions is to help you work through the draft in-year data model, and so submitting any questions for us to can then give you the answers to and help you through anything you're struggling with. That's what these events for. We may not be able to answer everything. In fact, I can definitely tell you now we won't be able to answer everything, but it will give us those questions that we can then go away, work with, and get you these answers by the end of May. So you can submit questions in advance, and I'm going to throw a bunch of links on there just in case anyone's missed anything. You can submit questions to us, and I can see a few of you have already done that for today, as and when you think of them. So you don't have to do them all in one go. You can kind of do them in bits and pieces. That's absolutely fine. Those questions are the things that we're looking at today, and so a lot of the questions we're reading out today will be from that. Alternatively, as we're speaking here, if you suddenly think of something, you're welcome to put it in the Q&A box. But as Christopher's already said, please put it in the Q&A part of this, and then we can pull that off and put that with the rest of our questions. We're going to try and answer as many as we've got. So this first session is warming everyone up. It's the first week in January. Maybe I didn't think this through properly. There's not too many to do today, so it may be a shorter session today. But we will always answer those questions. So even if we can't do it in the live in a session, or we haven't answered a question today that you submitted, it's because we're working through the answers. There's no point me sitting here and saying I haven't got an answer to 20 questions. We might as well wait, get you the answer, and then come back when we've got it. And if we don't have time to fit all the questions into May, then by May, we will definitely publish them all on the website as we go. So we will give you those answers as we can. In terms of these sessions, so there's 4 planned. We will be publishing the recording of each, and so you can catch up with them if you can't see it today, or you might be catching up with them later as you hear this anyway. And we will publish all of the questions and answers that we've got there. So as I said, if we don't get time in the event, we will be putting them up there for you to pick them up when they're ready. So that's why we're here, that's why we're doing. I thought I'd start with a little bit of kind of where we are in terms of working on the data model. I know a lot of the questions I get is, yeah, but when are we going to find out things? What are you actually doing? What's changing? So this is where we kind of stand at the moment. It is a bit of a draft plan. We're just kind of working out so I can give you a bit more specific timings. What we've been doing is trying to work out where we need to run consultation items because they're big enough you need a bit more time to think about it, or actually where we kind of know where some things are going to change and we can just change those. So I've got kind of a few bunches of consultations that we're going through. The first one, and looking at timings of where we are now, it's likely to be kind of February time the consultation will be out. That's a consultation on the reference period's timings. So the reference period blocks and exactly what it's going to be. We know roughly what they're going to be, and we just want to kind of sense check that and just get the nuance of a couple of dates with the sector. So that will come out and hopefully give you a bit more information about what they mean, because I know there are some questions around how it works. Related to that, a consultation around graduate outcomes population and how that feeds in or doesn't, and kind of how that's affected by the dates that we pick, and just giving you a chance to feed into decisions around that. I think also something around historic amendments. I think that one I've got a bit of a question about exactly what the question is there, but there might be something in there as well to help you kind of understand how we vision that could happen. So that's the first block. The next block is a bit more around some of the data model stuff. And so it's coming later because I think we want to make sure we've got all the examples in those that we want to give you to help us make a decision. So those are going to be around March time, and it will be around cost center, FTE, and whether we move session status to engagement. So the cost center ones come around because of requirements and the OFS we're going to remove modules, and then we realize actually cost center is very important, and do we keep it linked or do we move it? And we know the PGR question has been there for a while. We're going to try and resolve all of those in one go. So that's what that one's around. The FTE one is around, do we have one UK method, and what does this method need to be to cope with in-year data and make that kind of make sense to be usable data in year, and also kind of make sense so that can we get a UK picture rather than having the 2 pictures we've got now. And then the last one, moving session status to engagement. So lots of different feedback around some of the student core session stuff we've had, some of the resubmitting consultation we had, and how that's kind of recorded. That's where this one's come about. So this is the, I guess the combination of all those different things, and this could resolve some of that. So it's giving you the opportunity to feed into that decision. The last block then at the moment is consultation around April. Now I'll say consultation loosely here to make sure that I set expectations correctly. It's a student course session one. Now we've had lots of different ones around student course session, as you'll all know, because many of you have contributed to those. I think where we've landed with that is that it's not going to change. In fundamentally, it's not going to change. Around the edges, there could be changes we can make. We can make it a bit more flexible or a bit more adaptable in the rules, maybe something like that. There are things we can do that, to be honest, are more tweaks around that to help and make it easier for providers in the sector. So at the minute, and this one is last because I think we just need to kind of pull our own thoughts together internally about how we badge this to you, is this more showing you all the working we've done and all the other consultations that are related to that and how we've got to this place, or is there actually any outstanding questions left in that we do need your feedback on? So that one is kind of there as a placeholder to make sure we still have a chance to wrap it all up and give you a last chance to kind of say around what we want to do with that. So those are the kind of plans we've got. As I say, those are the things that have come up as we've done things. There might be others. I don't think it's likely. I think we've kind of covered enough of the model now. We're fairly confident that's where we need consultation feedback from the sector. There's been a couple of questions related to some of those. So there's one around the cost centers particularly and moving it, whether that's going to help or not, and whether we've got the right recording in there, and the student load and FTE and whether predicting it's going to work, and particular examples around how students are going to be there. Now, we're not going to address those questions today because we know consultations are coming. We will take those questions and make sure we've given them kind of answered in the preamble in the consultation, so that helps you show where we're looking in that. So I will kind of put those questions to one side for now. So that's all the kind of consultation stuff. Giving a little bit of a background around the overarching stuff. Sorry, folks. I can see in the chat there's questions around slides. There is no slides. I'm reading my notes. I'm very happy to send them around if people find that useful. We didn't have time to prepare slides, is the honest answer there. A lot of this information is already there, and I'm going to publish something that will show you our consultation plan somewhere amongst the in-year stuff, so it will be written down for you. Absolutely. So the timescales and where we're kind of in the picture of things. So what we've been doing with statutory customers, and I'm really grateful many of them are here today, we've been working through kind of trying to look at the whole data model and see where we can reduce the ask where that's possible, and minimise the data model where that's there. So you'll know there is a specification page, another link coming, that shows all of this work that we've been doing and where we've got to with everything. So that kind of gives you the overall picture, and basically that's where we've got to up till now, is all of those bits of areas are kind of there. What we're trying to do is do it as soon as possible. So if you know something's not needed, we've tried to take it out as soon as possible. We're not waiting to in-year. There's no point doing that. We don't need to do that. So that does mean that there's quite a number of notification of changes that fall into a kind of a category of changes that are affected by this, but they've all been reflected in the notification of changes. Some of you did point out we were a little bit late with the 25 ones, and we've corrected that now. So they will all kind of reflect where we've tried to make things optional initially and then potentially remove things the year after to give you a bit of flexibility on how long it might take to get things out of the model from your side of things. The last one then is the 27-28 notification of changes. That one hasn't gone out yet, and that is because it is due to go out at the end of this January, so in 4 weeks time. That will include all of the LLE, lifelong learning entitlement related things for providers in England. So again, there's quite a few actually LLE related questions come in. I'm not going to address those because I think some of that will be answered anyway in the notification of changes. And actually I'm wondering this on the fly, there's quite a few questions coming in, so it might make more sense to have an LLE focus session on those things instead. So yeah, so that'll be there, and once that one's out, we should have all of the notification of changes all the way up until we get to the in-year one. So thinking about where we're kind of going with that, what we are doing to prepare for the specific in-year data model now, and last link coming in, we published the draft kind of in-year data specification back in September, I think it was, last year. I've put the link in there. You can get the spreadsheet where we've gone against every data item and kind of statutory customers have fed in as to whether or not they need that to be in an in-year reference period or annual at the end of the reference period is enough. So that's where that one is on that. I've lost my train of thought now. Yeah, so we've done that. We've published that. We've left that there so providers can work through that as and when they've got a chance to do that. These Q&A sessions then help us work through those requirements, as I say, and we can start to work through any problems that are there. Consultations are planned to do some of those bigger items. And what that then means is by the end of July, we will have a picture of what statutory customers then confirm they need. We've adapted anything we need to for providers to do that, and we can then announce what we think will need to be collected for the reference periods in year and the annual reference periods for 28-29, which is kind of our first official in-year data submissions. That will all be confirmed by the end of this July, so July 2026. That's what we're kind of working to. That's the final deadline. That's another reason we're going to put these events a bit more iteratively to help you kind of work through and engage when you are ready as providers, rather than just kind of trying to force it on you at certain times and only run events that only some of you can make. So that's why we've gone. We've got a different way of engaging with you this time. I think that's all I wanted to say about questions and timescales around that. So I think what we'll do then is we will launch into the questions that you submitted. So what we wanted to do is kind of try and group them up a little bit if we can. So we've got a few sections, if you like, that we've come up with today. I will start then by passing them over to Ruth, I think, and you're going to start with the first bunch of questions for us.
Yes, thank you, Rachel. So as Rachel said, we've kind of published that draft data model showing which data items are required in year versus at the end of the year. So that's prompted a few questions related to the data items that are not required in year but are required by the end of the year, specifically in terms of whether you can submit those in year. So this came up a few times, and there were a couple of examples. So someone highlighted there's some course-related data that isn't required in year, and they said that it would be more work for them to take it out than to just submit it. Another example we had was around some personal data about the students that's generally collected at registration. So responses suggested it would be ready earlier. So our general position on this is we don't expect to have kind of validation that blocks the return of those data items in year. What that model has gone through is tell you what do we require in year versus what we require at the end of the year. If there's items that are required at the end that is easier for you to submit earlier, we're not intending to kind of have validation that blocks that, because we're going to need that data ultimately anyway. The bit that we need to work through a bit is around the approach to data deliveries and quality assurance of those items. So where we have optional data items now, we generally include them in the deliveries and they're subject to any relevant validation. These fields are kind of a new type of field because they're not optional, they're not required, but they're required in the future. They're not required yet. So we need to kind of work through how any quality assurance or would work on those and if they'd be included in deliveries. But the general kind of principle, we don't want to stop you submitting that data earlier if you have it available. It just is a question about any kind of onward use and validation of that data. So hopefully that's answered those few questions that came in, or at least the first part of them. I think I'm handing back to you, Rachel, for the next kind of couple of questions.
Yeah, I think that's it. We'll do a bit of a tag team today. So the next one then is around a bit more general timing kind of things that are coming in and how we're managing changes between years. So question around when the new in-year data model will be implemented. So I've kind of said that in the preamble, really. It's the 28-29 is the first actual in-year collection. There might be other things happening before then, but that's the first official one. So we're hoping to do the notification changes by the end of July, and that will tell you the first reference period, so 28-156 and 28-056. There's an extra question for you. That's what the acronyms will be. So the first two letters are always the year. The middle one is going to be the reference period, and the annual picture will always be 0. And then the last two is the student record. So 56 is student record. So 28-156 is the first reference period, and 28-29 for the student record. We've done 0 for the end of the year because if we do at some point have more than one reference period, and we know that will increase to 2 for some providers at some point, we don't want to be renaming the annual picture every single year. So the annual one's always going to be 0. It's always been 0 anyway, and the 1s or 2s will then kind of slot in for the reference period up until that. So in terms of future changes, question around how kind of open it will be to doing some changes. So I've explained some of the work that we're doing. We want to have that locked down by July. We're trying to kind of review some of those problematic areas and the questions and feedback that you've been raising with us since Data Futures and some of this actually, trying to get all of those things resolved so that when we want it and need it multiple times a year, we've kind of solved all of those questions, as many as we can. In terms of frequency, so when will we be announcing changes? So you know that now our current thing would be once a year. We announce for the next year, and we've got that notification of changes pages where they're all together. Basically, we want to kind of do a similar thing, and that's what we're working to at the moment. We'll do one announcement each year, and that will wrap together the reference period and end of year annual picture for the same thing into one notification of changes. That's our expectation at the moment. Obviously, there's always the exception when I talk about the schema changes, that things like postcode lists being updated and UCAS qualifications coming in, we might have to reconsider those. But I think what we want to work to is we want one schema for the reference period and annual picture. We don't want to change the schema. Any requirements changes we want to handle through quality rules. So that's what we're going to start with, one announcement, one year for the whole kind of reference periods and annual picture together. How much notice providers are going to receive? So on a normal cycle, this is not a normal cycle right now, but in a normal cycle, it would be 12 months notice minimum for the small handful of changes that we were going to be making. So they were normally out the July before the collection period, starts. what we've committed to for this, so for anything that is a big change, so like the LLE one, 18 months notice. So the 27-28 will have 18 months notice, which is this January. For the 28-29, because of the significance of the changes, we would like to do the majority of that for 24 months in notice in advance. So that means that's why the end of July this year is then the deadline for the 28-29 model. Yes, inevitably there'll be a couple of things, I imagine, after that we haven't realised as providers start implementing them. But our aim is that most of that stuff is going to be there, and we know what we kind of want and what we require by the end of July, so we can communicate that to you. I think that's all the questions around timing. So I think back to you, Ruth, on some of the data item things.
Yep, thanks, Rachel. So there's a couple of other areas that came up that I wanted to cover. We had some questions around UCAS data and when that's required to be submitted. So there's sort of two parts to this. Firstly, entry qualifications. If you've had a look at the kind of draft model on the website, you'll see within there, statutory customers have confirmed that not expecting entry qualifications to be required in year. They're down as an end of year requirement. So hopefully that's good news in terms of that UCAS data not being required in year. In terms of other fields that are within the STAR-J file, they do vary by field and by nation. So I would recommend you have a look at the kind of draft model for the specific fields in your nation. It will say whether they're required in year or end of year. But there are some fields that are within the STAR-J file that are required in year. So there will be some requirements to submit those earlier, but not the entry qualifications. The other area that came up a few times related to qualifications awarded data, so particularly around unknown qualifications. So firstly, we had questions about how you would return unknown qualifications. Essentially the same way as you would do now in terms of actually submitting the data. That requirement wouldn't change, i.e. we have a engagement end date field and a reason for engagement ending. If an engagement's ended and it's an unknown outcome at that point, you give them an end date and an unknown reason for ending, and then you would submit them again in a subsequent collection to confirm that outcome once it's known. So in terms of that kind of approach to those, that's not planned to change. The second part of the kind of questions that were raised was more about the expected increase in the number of students that fall into that category because of the compressed timescales. So with in-year data collection, the time between potentially a student finishing and you having to sign off their data would be shorter in some cases. So there may be an increase in unknown outcomes, and that has a potential knock-on to associated populations like graduate outcomes, as Rachel mentioned earlier. So that came up a few times. We are looking at how we can mitigate that. There are potential options around using reference period 1 data to supplement the kind of previous annual collection once those awards are confirmed and able to be submitted. And as Rachel mentioned, we'll be running a consultation around reference period timings that will include the graduate outcomes kind of knock on an aspect as part of that. So they're all kind of tied together depending on the reference period timings would affect the level of impact on graduate outcomes. So we're keen for your input on that. We are, aware of the potential impact there and we'd like to mitigate it as much as we can. So we'll be consulting on that and getting kind of your feedback on the approach. I think back to Rachel.
So I think the next bunch of questions, I've put anything across to the OFS, basically. So these were all from providers in England, which is why I've put them across to OFS. They probably do apply in some sense to other nations, but I think some of them are specific to England. So Alison or Annalise, can I throw you the questions? I think I've sent you the link. I'll let you sort through them.
Okay, so I will make a start and Annalise can jump in when I get this wrong. I think there was a question, Rachel, around the coverage of module instance for in-year. And this, I think, does link to LLE and kind of module-only provision in terms of kind of some of the lines that we've taken on this to date. I think the questions kind of flagged that there's not been any mention of what's going to be happening for kind of course-based provision that isn't following those kind of modular pathways in terms of coverage of that module instance data. So kind of for kind of clarity's sake, what we're proposing is that for students on those modular pathways, and we'll provide more information on that in due course, there'll be a kind of fuller set of module level information requirements that we're going to retain. For students who aren't following modular pathways, for those on more conventional courses that they're studying kind of in the usual way, we are going to be asking for a very limited set of information at modular level. In all likelihood, the module title, the module subject, and potentially the FTE and cost centre information that currently sits at module level will want for all courses. As Rachel flagged earlier, there is a kind of ongoing discussion and outstanding question around whether we will retain kind of collection of FTE and cost centre data at module level, or whether there is potential benefit in moving it up to student course session level. As Rachel flagged, that needs kind of further debate and discussion. So depending on where that lands, if it lands at FTE and cost centre stay at module level, then in all likelihood we will require that limited set of module fields is returned at the in-year reference periods for all provision, including that's kind of course-based or not following that modular pathway. However, if we decide that moves to student course session level and cost centre and FTE are collected there instead, cost centre and FTE likely to be required at in-year and end-of-year reference periods. But the other module information that would be required for those non-modular pathways students, so basically subject and title of module, we would not require at the in-year reference periods. It would only be required at the end of year. Hopefully that makes sense. So, like I say, slightly contingent on where we land with where FTE and cost centre are going to sit, but in all likelihood, very limited information being required for non-modular students at the in-year point, likely at the end of year. Moving on, I think there was a question around module delivery role and the fields that sit within that entity. I think somebody's been very kind of eager-eyed and noted that the data model as published on the website suggests that that would be required at the end of year for English providers, despite it not currently being collected from English providers at all. That is a mistake, and one that we will kind of seek to rectify ASAP. For the avoidance of doubt, if it's not been collected from English providers to date, we are not proposing to kind of add that in. I think the only exception to that in terms of an existing field that sits within the data model is the carer field, which is currently only not collected for England, but there is an interest, at least, primarily I think led by DFE, to start collecting that from English providers. I think, kind of as we've noted in the published spreadsheet, we would really kind of welcome providers' feedback on the feasibility of adding that field into the data model, and the feasibility of that being returned at either a in-year or end-of-year. We are kind of open to kind of that feedback, and will make decisions accordingly. But there is a likelihood that, as I say, DFE are interested to have that data provided in the model for English providers going forward. I think the next question was around study abroad, which it's been noted that that's now been removed from some of the OFS funding calculations, given changes to HESIS in 2025. I think, and as we've kind of flagged in the kind of published spreadsheet, we are kind of remaining open to the future of that and a couple of the other fields that are kind of particularly linked to our funding uses of the HESA student data. I think it's probably too early to say that it can be removed. We are expecting kind of to consult more generally on some of our funding methods and approaches. So it will be kind of contingent on the outcomes of further consultation in that regard. But I think also worth noting that particularly for something like study abroad, there will be kind of wider interest in an application for that information. I think we are particularly mindful of changes to kind of participation in Erasmus and introduction of the international student levy mean that kind of government and kind of regulatory interest in student mobility is likely to kind of remain and increase going forward. So in all likelihood, that field is going to be providing insight for a wider range of uses than just our funding applications. So in all likelihood, not going anywhere, but we are keeping that under review. I think kind of linked, I think there was a question that came through around the ways in which HESIS would be incorporated into the data model for in-year and the student record going forward. And I think on this one, it's probably not the way that I would frame it. I think HESA and HESIS as data collections are fundamentally different, serving kind of different purposes. And while absolutely, yes, we do want to be able to make use of in-year data for funding purposes into the future, there's, as I mentioned earlier, a kind of funding consultation needed to establish what that would look like and kind of more fundamentally how our funding methods would make use of that. I think, therefore, kind of our approach is rather one that makes sure that the student record is collecting and capturing the relevant information that we would need to inform our funding approaches, and we're confident in kind of working through some of our requirements that we've kind of anticipated that to the full extent that we can. But I think probably thinking about it as incorporating HESIS is probably the wrong framing. Making sure that the student record is kind of geared up as it can be to serve those kind of funding applications is more the way to think about it. And like I say, very much kind of contingent on that future review of OS funding methods. I think, as long as I'm reading your list of questions right, Rachel, I think the last one was a comment around kind of burden reduction. I think certainly from the OFS perspective, we are very mindful that what the introduction of in-year reporting and some of the LLE changes, indeed, when they come through, what it's not doing is reducing burden per se. I think we've been really clear that kind of from our perspective, our kind of aim is to make sure that we've got the right data at the right time in the right way in order to kind of regulate effectively. We think that that's really important to make sure that our interventions have a kind of positive and meaningful impact on student experiences and outcomes from higher education. And we also think it's really important to enable you as higher education providers to kind of operate effectively. So part of that kind of right data at the right time is kind of in-year data and improving the timeliness of student data collection. Obviously, given the government's kind of LLE policy initiative, making sure that we've got the right data in that context is key too. So while we can appreciate that doesn't necessarily map out to a burden reduction, what we are really, really mindful of and what we're absolutely committed to is minimising the burden that results from these changes. I don't think we won't shy away from the fact that it increases data burden overall in all likelihood, but making sure that increase is kept to the absolute minimum that it can be is absolutely top priority from our perspective. So hopefully you will have seen that we are continuing to try and remove those fields that are creating unnecessary burden where they've become redundant in the record. You've seen that we are kind of focusing our efforts on building a system that is sustainable for the future. through particularly kind of the phased implementation of some of these changes, some of the kind of quality expectations, and rolling out the in-year collection approach over a period of years. We will be kind of continuing to make sure that we're looking at related collections such as HESIS into the future to make sure that we're not collecting more information than we need in the grand scheme of things. Are there any questions I've missed, Rachel?
No, those are the ones that were submitted in advance. So I think what I'll do now is just have a quick look if anyone's submitted any while we've been talking. So the first one I'll come to, and Christopher, can you unmute Laura Patrickson on this? Because I think she's going to help us with the answer on this. Clarifying around when the first kind of in-year collection is actually required. Now, we've already said 28-29 is the first kind of official one, but I just wanted Laura to just feed in about what we're saying around what actually comes for the 27-28 collection and what that might need for providers side of things. I'm not sure if we've confirmed it yet, so I was hoping Laura can help us with that. Are you able to unmute her, Christopher? Silence.
I can have a go. I think Rachel.
Sorry, I missed that for a bit.
Can you unmute Laura Patrinson, please,
Yeah,
Christopher?
just 1 sec. I'm trying to find that. 1 sec. Okay, Laura, you need to unmute yourself. I've allowed your mic.
Oh, great. Hello, everyone. Can you hear me okay? Thanks very much. So this was clarifying what we might expect from a trial or activity in 27-28. So we are doing some work at the moment to plan what it is we need to test and how, but the intention is that in 27-28, any in-year submission would be an opt-in one. So we'll be working with people to try and gather a group who are happy to submit kind of what they've got at that stage in the year to help inform our planning and our rollout. And that potentially that might happen in 26-27 as well, the opportunity to kind of get involved and try out that functionality. But the first mandatory in-year collection will be in 28-29. We'll be sharing more details next month about what that kind of early submission and testing in the years ahead of 28-29 look like. So there'll be more coming out on that. So hopefully that has answered the question.
Yeah, thank you, Laura. Okay, the next one then is around reference periods and the possibility that I've mentioned to there around having potentially twice a year. So it is providers in England and Scotland where we've had requirements come in to say that they could at some point, not yet confirmed, move to 2 in-year reference periods, but providers in Northern Ireland and Wales will stay at 1 in-year reference period. In terms of the kind of use around that, we could say some stuff now, but actually the consultation that we're putting out first has probably got a better context setting around why the deadlines have been set where they are. So I think I'm going to hold that question, and if it's still relevant, you can email back in later, because the consultation will probably answer some of that for you in better detail anyway. There's some diagrams and things in there, so it'll probably help a bit there. Another question around LLE. I said I'd pause on that, but as a reply to Jim in the chat, yes, I'm afraid there is going to be more stuff in that. So yeah, we'll give you the details properly there at the end of January. Where else have we got? I've lost the chat. It's refreshed. Question on wait. Done the how many cents, so that's the repeat one, that's fine. Question on schema and understanding. So schema being the same for in-year and end-of-year. Yes, so basically what we are working to now is that anything that is, say, we'll go for the first year, anything that is a 28 collection, the first reference period or the annual picture collection, we want that to be the same schema. I mean, we don't, what we're working to at the moment is that we don't want it to be in and out on the schema. It will be confusing, the system will be messed up. That just seems like a really dumb thing to do. So we want one schema for both any in-year reference periods and the full annual picture to be the same, and that will be the same across all providers as it is now. Yeah, Open University, you've asked the question, I can see why you've asked it. Yeah, one schema for everyone. If there are nuances in there, so some data items may or may not be required, whether that's country-based or whether that is reference period or end of year based, all of that kind of nuance we're going to try and handle through quality rules or quality expectations, not in the schema. So that is a bit of a change to our expectation. Change to what we currently do now, because a lot of the schema holds the structure stuff, but we think that's just going to work better for this. So yeah, that's our expectation. That's what we're kind of working around to make sure that that is definitely workable, particularly like the notification of changes I announced. That does mean everything has to be kind of done at the same time. We think that's possible. We're just working through to make sure that that works. So yeah, that is the plan around that. I don't think there's a question about cost centre, but I'm going to pause on that and we'll come back to that in the consultation. As I said, if they're going to be answered in consultations, I won't try and give you an answer now because it'll probably be wrong. So that we'll come back to that one. I don't think, and colleagues, please help me here. I can't see any of the chat, any question in the Q&A chat that we haven't answered.
I think, Rachel, it might just be worth clarifying. Someone's asked to be clear, how many HESA student returns will English providers do in 28, 29, 2 or 3? And I think we're saying for the first year, it will be 1 in-year return and 1 annual return. It's a possibility of a third in the future. It will definitely not be from year 1, that it will be straight to kind of 3 returns.
Yeah, thank you. Sorry, I said 1 in-year return, didn't I? And we're talking about anything that's in the middle of the year as in-year returns, and the end of year is kind of annual thing. So no, you're right. It's 2 years over 2 returns over the whole year, moving to 3. Okay, I can't see anything on there. There's a very detailed question there around EOP and fund comp. So unless OFS can answer that on the fly, I think we'll take that away and make sure we come back with a proper answer on that one, and that's fine. Colleagues, are there any other questions we've missed? I thought today might be a little shorter than the hour because it's the first one and we're all getting back from Christmas, but I think that's out to the bulk of the questions that we have. But does anyone want to say anything else, or any statutory customer that's here? Because we've got most of the representatives here. Is there anything else you'd like to say to anyone about anything we've discussed today? Okie dokie. All right then. We will take anything else away. Thank you very much, everyone, for attending. I will let you go, and we will go squill away and put some official answers onto the website for you so you can have it all written down. But thank you very much for your time, and hopefully we'll see you in February.